fila trova.
Okay, I didn't originally plan on making a behind the scenes video to Los Angeles on Film, mainly because that was just a result of me playing around with different ideas and setups, but if it's going to be informative for some of you and inspire you to create, I guess, something similar, then I'm more than happy to create this video for you. I first started working on this 3 months prior to the actual upload date, and I had filmed the chapter 3 with the Cineso 800T, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with that footage. I knew I wanted to have more of a story involved with it as well, compared to, I guess, some of my other videos, and I was kind of just waiting for an idea to develop for a story, and I was in the process of printing out photos to put on my wall, more so to give me inspiration and also to kind of lay out what different sequences for a book would look like. And the idea kind of just developed from there, where I'm missing photos and wanted to go out and shoot to fill up the rest of the wall. I did storyboard the intro part of the video. I had that just to sort of visualize my idea before I started shooting. All I did was just go into the Apple Notes app, and anytime I would expand upon an idea that I had, I'd just write it down. Then I just go into Shot Deck and I'd look for stills that had the same kind of storyline or look and just bring them into the Notes app. And the cool thing with Shot Deck is you can search up any keyword you have in mind. I think for a couple stills I just searched up wall of photos and stills actually came out. So yeah, I'd highly recommend Shot Deck. It is a subscription plan, but in my opinion it's worth it. They did give me a discount code. This isn't sponsor or anything, I just reached out to try and get a code for you guys to use, so feel free to use this code and you'll get a discount on your subscription. But as I finished filming my scenes, I just replaced them with my stills, and this also helped with editing, kind of just finding the right flow of the intro piece. I think storyboarding definitely helped a lot. Okay, so as for the gear, I shot on the Fujifilm X-T4 and the Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro. I really wanted to shoot anamorphic throughout the whole entire video, so with the Fujifilm X-T4 I used a serial 50mm and 24mm, but shooting anamorphic with the Blackmagic Pocket 6K is a pain in the ass, so instead I opted to use a ultra wide angle lens, the Tokine 11-20, and that just kind of helped give me a look similar to shooting on anamorphic. I used the X-T4 to film the intro, the outro, and chapter 3, and everything else I shot with the 6K Pro. And I'm glad I decided to shoot the chapter 1 and 2 with the 6K, because shooting anamorphic with those scenes would have been really distracting because of those anamorphic flares, so I'm glad I decided to just keep a clean, wide look for those scenes. And along with that, I also did use an external audio recorder for some scenes, the H1N. As for the stills camera, I used the Konica Hexar AF with Cineso film stocks, and used other obvious gear like a tripod and ND filters.
1, 2.
Now I'm just going to be breaking down some of the scenes and how I shot them and why I shot them the way I did. I'm going to be watching on my TV, so if you see me looking up, that's why. So for these intro scenes, I originally envisioned showcasing shots of LA, kind of more popular shots of LA, I guess I should say. Shots that I think represented LA and what a lot of people would recognize. But then I decided that I wanted to showcase areas that are closer to me, you know, a little closer to a representation that I know of LA and where I've grown up, because I wanted to showcase some beauty in areas outside of normal LA, I guess. Okay, so these intro scenes were shot with the 24mm and the X-T4. I really wanted a bright and airy feel to these scenes, so what I did was just shot my Godox SL60W right into the ceiling, and that kind of just provided a nice even spill across the whole scene. I for some reason really wanted a close-up. I think it kind of helped show emotion, my emotion. It just helps, I think, make the viewer realize that this isn't going for a typical YouTube video look. It's more so having a narrative aspect to this video. And the way I lit this close-up of my expression, I just had my Godox with the softbox and grid attachment to my right, and some negative fill to my left, just to add a bit more contrast to the final image. For the shot of the cameras, if you've seen some of my previous videos, you know that I prefer to shoot digital, and I wanted to show some hesitation in deciding to shoot film, but ultimately I did decide to shoot on a different format that I don't usually shoot. So for these car scenes, I know a lot of people were wondering how I shot it and what type of rig I used, but I just used a tripod. I laid it out on my truck bed, opened up the window, and just shot directly into the car. My camera did fall once, so I don't think I'd recommend you doing this. I think there are car rigs that you can use. And then for the wide shot of me driving, I just placed the camera and tripod right next to me and held it to give it some stabilization. I didn't use IBIS for any of these, nor did I add stabilization in post for these intro scenes. I think just the weight of the whole camera rig and tripod was enough to get some pretty stable footage. And for the outside environment shots while driving, I just had someone drive me around. These were all within like 2 or 3 minutes of my home, and I just grabbed some footage while they were driving me around. So on to chapter 1, these are all shot with the 6K, and I'm not going to do a breakdown for these because it's pretty straightforward, but there were a lot of locked on shots, and I didn't use a tripod for any of these shots. The good thing about shooting at a 6K resolution is that in post, using DaVinci's stabilization, you can easily stabilize it and make it look like it was a locked on tripod shot. But the only time I didn't use that stabilization were for some of the shots that had a lot of movement, because I think the handheld feel was a better choice than going with a static shot. Chapter 2, again, this was filmed with the 6K. Once again, I didn't use a tripod, I just shot all handheld and added the stabilization post. So like I said earlier, I had filmed the chapter 3 scenes a long time before everything else, so I was just trying to figure out a way to transition the video into that, and I wanted to make it look like I was parked outside of the fair and loaded my film and then went to go shoot, and I wanted to do it in an interesting way at my house. So what I did was just shoot my Godox SL60 directly into my truck and just kind of drove into it, and I knew that flare would add a super interesting aspect to that scene. For the shot of me loading up the film, I just brought the light higher up so the spill would be inside the actual car. These shots were all with the X-T4 and 24mm anamorphic, and I made the mistake of leaving IBIS on. Luckily it didn't harm my footage that much, but there were a couple scenes where there is a noticeable wobble on the corners, so I couldn't use those, or I just cut the scene a little shorter. But yeah, I think it all worked out in the end. So for these outro scenes, I shot these right after the intro scenes. I just waited for it to get dark, and I think I just moved the light a little further back, and also warmed up the scenes in post just to give a variation from the intro and the outro, both in the look and the mood of it. But I knew it was important to have a closing to everything. I think it made it feel more like a film, more so than just a YouTube video. At least that's how I hope it came off. But yeah, I'm really happy with how it all ended up turning out. Okay, on to the music. I was 100% set on using copyrighted music. I knew exactly what I wanted to use, and I didn't want to compromise my vision for ad revenue purposes. But on top of not being able to monetize your video, certain countries, because the video is copyrighted, will not allow viewers to watch the video. So it was the day before I uploaded the video. I was pretty much done with the video and I was just putting some final touches on it, but I decided to at least look for uncopyrighted music. And my music licensing service of choice has always been Musicbed, and it was just within a couple hours that I found the songs that I felt fit the vibe, and I brought them into the project and I watched the project back with the music that I found. I honestly couldn't believe how perfect I think it all kind of played out with the songs together. But yeah, big thank you to Musicbed, who is also today's sponsor. Music is a big part of my creative process, and the reason I love Musicbed so much is because I can treat it like I would a normal music streaming service, and create playlists of songs that inspire me for whenever I need some inspiration for beginning or finishing a project. And the reason I'm able to do this is due to the high quality of music found on Musicbed. The roster is represented by so many incredibly talented musicians and bands and composers who pour their hearts into their work, and you can definitely hear the difference in quality. These are artists who have sold out shows and who have millions of followers on streaming platforms. And with Musicbed, you can use them in your projects. Use my code serr for a free month with a purchase of an annual subscription. So this isn't going to be a full in-depth tutorial because I already do have that on my channel, but I'm basically just going to go through and show you how I use my power grade, and also hopefully introduce you to some techniques that I used to create the look that I desired, and also how I problem solved an issue with an ND filter. I use DaVinci Resolve for all of my editing and color grading, and also, I guess because it might be important for some of you, I do use the M1 Mac Mini for all of this. Alright, so I'm going to take you through the node structure that the project mainly consisted of. Firstly, noise reduction. The footage wasn't noisy at all, even throughout the night scenes, but generally what I like to do is noise reduction is only a part of the studio version of DaVinci Resolve, but I go into spatial threshold and bring up the luma and chroma to my desired strength. But yeah, just a tiny bit. My footage wasn't that noisy to begin with. After the noise reduction, this is specific to this footage, but I created a power window around this patch of sunlight, and this just helped maintain the detail in the tunnel while also having correct exposure in this part of the scene. Then next, my power grade, which again I use throughout my whole project. I'm not going to take you through the entire thing. Like I said before, I wanted a 35mm look, so I kept the 35mm grain along with the 35mm halation. The only time I changed the halation was towards the end, and I'll show you that a little later. And I just go through the footage and the different characteristics that I've created and toggle them on and off depending on whether I thought the footage benefited from it. Dust, this is the one thing that I also did keep on throughout the entire project. But after I fixed the exposure, the next thing was I did use one of my looks. So I used the warm love, and I think I kept this at 50% output, and this just helped bring this warmth into the footage. Let's do this one. So again, noise reduction, sharpening. Oh, I didn't go into the sharpening. I'll go into this in the next scene, but what I do want to show you here, again, just went through the power grade and did what I thought the footage needed. I accidentally shot this way warmer than I intended, so I fixed that. And what I'm going to show you is how I added this cyan tint to the clip. And basically, let me just do it all over again. I went into my gain and added a little bit of a green cyanous tint, just a little tiny bit, something like that. And it looks fine, but you can tell that my blacks, they have way too much blue in there. So what I do whenever I want a clean black look, I'll go over here, choose the qualifier, right click, and you're gonna choose show picker RGB value. And what this does, it essentially just gives you the RGB value of the individual pixels. So as you can see, there's a lot more blue and green than there is red. So what I'm gonna do is let me do it in a separate note too, just so you can see. I'm gonna go over to my log wheels, and this is just a variation of the primaries where you can make more fine-tuned adjustments. What I'm gonna do is go over to the shadow and just pump up the red. And I'm also gonna bring down the blue. And I don't like to trust my eye. It's better to trust the actual values. So we're basically just trying to get these three colors at a neutral standing point, and it's looking pretty good right now. I think the one thing we do need to do is bring down the green a bit. And now there's way too much red. Yeah, I brought that down too much. So you see we're getting closer, or actually we're pretty much there. Gonna bring it down just a tiny bit more, and I'm gonna bring up the blue just a tiny bit. So it's just playing around with the colors until you get to that neutral standing point. I think I'm gonna leave it somewhere around there. This is probably good enough. Yeah, this is fine. So if we go ahead and toggle this on and off, you can see the difference that made, and it really balanced out the footage. Let's go to another scene. Oh, let's do this one. I like the colors here a lot. this is a good place to show you the sharpening. So there's a couple ways of doing sharpening. There's one way of doing it through the blur and sharpening tab, but the way that I like to do it, there's actually an effect for sharpening. So you open that up and I put it at 1.4. So let me go ahead and zoom in here. And if I go ahead and toggle this on and off, it's more so about sharpening the grain than it is sharpening the footage, because it gives the grain this baked in look, which makes your footage look more like actual film. But if we go into my power grade, again, just more of the same. For my look, I think this time I went with Cinegreen. And yeah, it's just playing with the different characteristics till I get to a result that I like. Let's go to let's do this one. So I have an ND filter that also has a polarization filter attached to it. And for some reason, I think it's because I was using such a wide lens. If I toggle this compound node, you can see how blue the sky actually looks. And this affected some of my other scenes too. I'll probably go through another one. And essentially what I did, if we go into it, firstly, I qualified the sky and just got rid of that blue. I desaturated it to 8.4. And that helped get rid of that terrible blue that was overtaking the image. And then after, I just created a power window around the top right, softened that up, and just brought up the exposure of it, and that helped even out the footage. So I think it looks much more balanced now. Let's do the 6K clip, and if we go into my power grade, what I wanted to show you is something that I did to the sky, and essentially I just went into my curves, brought up the green so that the brightest parts of my image had this kind of teal greenish tint to it. I think it was a nice color contrast to this golden magenta look. And as far as my power grade, I didn't use any looks. I just went for the original look that I made with the LUT. Go into another clip with the skyish shoe, the skate park one. So again, just did the exact same thing that I did in the other node, and that fixed the issue that I was having. Let's do a black and white clip. I had a couple questions about that. So what I did after my power grade is just desaturated the image fully, all the way to 0. And that gave me the black and white look. I still kept the grain, the halation and all that, because it still added a lot to the image. But if you're gonna do this, just make sure you do it at the end of your node structure and don't make any color adjustments afterwards, because you will get a color cast over your image if you make changes after you desaturate. Okay, I think we're gonna do one more. Let's do a night scene. Oh, I love the blues here. Okay. So I shot this with the XT4 at 2000 ISO, and even then the footage wasn't noisy. If I turn off the noise reduction, turn off the grain, if I go through this, there's very little visible noise. So I didn't even have to use the noise reduction, but again, I just kept it on throughout the whole project. With the power grade, I this time decided to go with the 16mm halation, and I also brought up the brightest parts of my image. It gave the light sources a really nice pop that really did benefit the footage. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't think I'm gonna show any more, but again, if you want a more in-depth tutorial on film emulation, I do have that up on my channel. And apart from going more in depth into my power grade, I do also present you with some alternative ways of recreating a similar look for free with just a free version of DaVinci Resolve. So go ahead and check that out. Hopefully you learned a couple things and it was somewhat insightful, and you can incorporate some of these ideas into your own work. So now I'm going to go ahead and answer some questions that you all sent me in regards to the video that I didn't feel like I answered in these previous segments. Adam Schwenkel asked, I have been shooting a ton of photo and video and I don't know where to start with editing. I think the best advice I can give you is to figure out the type of feel that you want the video to have and find a song that fits that feeling and base your edit off of that song. I think the music dictates the big part of the way your video should flow. So if you don't know where to start, figure out the music first and then go into editing. 24 Exposures asked, how do you record your audio? So I did use the H1N audio recorder, but I only use those for a couple scenes. Most of the audio was just straight from either the Pocket 6 or the XT4. The XT4's internal mics aren't, I wouldn't recommend using them. Luckily, I had Musicbed over it, so it kept the focus off of the sounds. But the 6K actually has fantastic internal mics, in my opinion at least. So for instance, for the shots of me loading film, I wanted to make sure I had crisp and sharp audio for that, so I used the H1N recorder. Margarida Nina, I'm so sorry if I messed up your name. How do you plan your shots to fit the narrative and tone that you want to create? Again, I think it comes down to music and knowing the tone that you want to create, and then making sure the editing and the grade kind of just fits that tone. I think that's a terrible answer to your question. For instance, the way I lit some of the intro pieces, I made sure that it had this bright look to it through the lighting and the color grade, because I wanted a more nostalgic feel. And honestly, as I continue editing the video, some of that feeling, I kind of lose it just because I've watched it so many times. So I'll show it to someone else and just ask them to tell me how it makes them feel and how the video just kind of comes off to them. Krister Bay Losses wants to know my filming workflow, like do you shoot alone or with some help? I try and shoot everything by myself, but as I said earlier, for the scenes where I needed shots while driving, I asked someone to drive me around. I could have maybe done it with a tripod, but it was just easier to ask somebody. Blank Photography, what inspires you so much in LA? 100% the people and the diversity found within the city. I think living in LA, it makes this all a little easier. It kind of does most of the work for you. You know, you're just there to observe and to capture what is going on around you. And although there's a lot of issues and some negatives with living in the city, I mean, this is where I've grown up. This is where I've lived my entire life. I kind of feel obligated to showcase a city through my eyes, and big thing I want to continue to do in the future is just showcase and represent life in LA that isn't normally represented. I got a lot of responses not asking any questions, but just saying that they enjoyed the video and the video was great. Thank you. I love you guys. Eldia Fernandez asked, do you have an inspiration making this video, like a director or a movie? And I don't think I have a specific inspiration, or at least a film or director. I think it's just a culmination of a bunch of YouTube videos and movies that I've seen that kind of just led me to create this. But I guess with the music choices and the way I shot the whole thing, I think I was definitely going for a similar feeling to what Tarantino films give the audience. Chris Huang NYC said, I love your films. Would love to get insight on your run and gun workflow, filming and taking photos. This one's interesting. I haven't really discussed this aspect of it, but usually when I film these types of videos, I have my stills camera on a camera strap ready to take a photo while I hold my video camera next to me, and usually I'll take the photo first and then film, because it's usually the photo that I take that dictates the video, or when I just need B-roll, I'll just grab footage near or wherever I'm at. Dan Graciano asked, any tips for natural lighting? You know very well how to use it. Thank you. Do you choose a specific time? I usually don't limit, or try not to limit myself to a certain time of day, but the best day or the best time of day to shoot is definitely golden hour. I think for both the chapter 1 and 2, I shot during golden hour or right before it. I think I get like a good hour or two to get photos and footage. I think that time of day was definitely the way to go for this video, at least. Alex asked, how much footage did you shoot in minutes overall for this video? I don't know how many minutes, but each shot that I get, I try and get around 10 seconds. Usually in the video, I try and use 5 seconds of it, so especially if I'm shooting handheld, I need at least 5 seconds of somewhat stable footage. But if I would have shot everything and decided to edit it all at once in one go, I would have been so overwhelmed. So what I did was just edit in pieces. I edited chapter 3 with the photos, I think that same night that I shot it, and same with everything else. Anytime I just finished shooting, I'd go right to editing, and that just helped make the whole process a little easier as far as editing goes. Yeah, I don't know how I got to there. You didn't ask a question in regards to that, but yeah, okay. Tobias asked, did you use some kind of video rig or cage, and did you use IBIS at all? I try and always rig out my camera just to add some weight. It really helps with handheld shooting, and IBIS No, although I did by accident in chapter 3, but I normally try not to use IBIS because if I see a wobble in my footage, that's unusable. I can't use it. I hate how it looks. It makes the footage look very unnatural. Hawkman wants to know about the planning. Was it all planned ahead, like the shots and scenes, or did you make it up all as you went along? The intro and outro were all planned. I kind of think I had to in order to make sure the story flowed, but for everything else, I mean, since it's street photography, it's hard to really plan that sort of stuff, but I always choose a location where I'm gonna pretty much set up and just follow my eye and hope for the best. Okay, I think I've answered enough questions, and I think I've given you all a good idea of what it took and how I made this film. So thank you all for watching. Hopefully a lot of you made it all the way to the end. I feel like this is a super long video, but yeah, I can't thank you all enough for the support on that video and everything else that I put out. So I'll see you all in my next video.